Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm not usually one to read notes, but there are a couple of things that I want to make sure I get across. And Minister Boissonnault, thank you so much for being here. For all of the kids, trans kids that woke up in Alberta this morning, and we know because we've talked to them, feeling less safe, want them to know that we are here and we see you, that you matter. That's important. To the Premier's video now, I have to tell you I was struck by the soft tone. I was struck by the almost spa-like music that accompanied it, and then the vitriol that it was. We are talking about kids that are being othered in a way that we have not seen. I'm a parent. I've got 2 kids. We have a great relationship. That's not the case everywhere else. To focus in on the most vulnerable segment of our society is reprehensible. I also want to draw a line to what happened last week because I think it bears saying that in Alberta, the Premier welcomed Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson espoused far-right views. That's not surprising, but it was homophobic, it was anti-trans, anti-queer, and the Premier validated that. And here we are days later with this policy or policies or guidelines that squarely denigrate trans kids, trans youth. So the message today is, what kind of Canada do we want? Like, what are we creating here? What are we trying to create here? What is she trying to create here? What is the Conservative Party trying to create here? A Canada where there is no diversity? Where if you're different, you don't matter? Is that where we're at? Because that is unacceptable. I'm going to stop now so that Minister Boissonnault can say a few words, and then we'll take questions.
Merci, Marci. Je vais m'adresser en premier en français à tous les Albertains, les francophiles, les francophones, les franco-curieux, les franco-queer, les franco-trans qui ont été ébranlés hier soir par la vidéo de Madame Smith, la Première ministre de l'Alberta. Nous sommes ici à vos côtés pour vous défendre, pour protéger vos droits. Et sachez, tout le monde, que ce n'est pas une question de droits parentaux. C'est une question de protéger les jeunes. Et des politiques que la Première ministre a dévoilées sans consultation, sans précédent, les plus draconiens qu'on a jamais vus ici au pays. Moi, j'ai vécu dans les années 80-90 en Alberta où c'était un temps très homophobe, haineux pour les personnes LGBTQ2. Et moi, j'ai pensé qu'on a développé, et je sais qu'on a développé et bâti une province très inclusive. Et donc, les propos de Mme Smith ne sont pas seulement ébranlants, ça va mettre la jeunesse en péril. Et pour le moment, aujourd'hui, première étape, c'est de faire savoir aux jeunes, tous les jeunes de l'Alberta, parce qu'elle n'a pas visé seulement la jeunesse LGBTQ2, mais toute la jeunesse. On est ici, on est là pour vous, et on va être à votre défense. Et là, j'ai fait une analogie. Pour nous, dans la communauté LGBTQ2, c'est comme notre moment de l'OTAN. Une attaque sur une de nos communautés, c'est une attaque sur nous tous. Et là, il faut être à la défense de notre communauté. Et donc, je vous encourage d'écrire votre député du UCP, d'écrire votre député fédéral, de demander aux gens du Canadian Pride Caucus qu'est-ce qu'ils vont faire, de poser la question à Pierre Poilievre, qu'est-ce qu'il va faire, et ensuite de mobiliser. On va avoir un rallye à Edmonton sur la colline parlementaire législative à Edmonton ce dimanche, et moi je vais y être. To all of the youth that listened to Premier Smith's video last night, and I can tell you I watched it and then I read the policy she's intending to put in place, and then I spent the night consoling people on the phone. I had people who offered to help, who are from the trans community and the queer community, and to a person they broke down on the phone crying and saying, please help us, what can we do, how can you help, how can we work together? This isn't a question about parental rights. This is about keeping kids safe. This is a unilateral ideological move by Danielle Smith and the UCP government to marginalize kids, to other them, and to out not just trans and gender non-binary kids, but all queer kids. You're going to go to a school as a young queer kid or a gender questioning kid and now have to look over your shoulder to wonder which of your other students are going to out you so that they call your parents. Nobody calls you when you join the chess club. Nobody calls your parents when you join the basketball team. Nobody calls your parents when you join the debate team. But now, if somebody thinks you're questioning or queer, they're going to tell the teacher, and the teacher's got to call the parents. That is not the Alberta I want or that we want. And so I can say this to all the youth, we're here with you. We are going to look at every option that we have, and this is our NATO moment as an LGBTQ2 community. An attack on one of our communities is an attack on us all, and I need allies and champions to stand up. We already have the Social Worker Association of Alberta, the Alberta Teachers Association, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, and EGAL, who's already mentioned that they will start a court challenge on board. There will be a rally at the legislature in Edmonton on Sunday. I will be there, and if there's ever been a time in this century for people to stand up for the kind of Canada and the kind of Alberta we want, it's today. Merci.
So what can and what will you do to respond?
Oh, merci. Thank you so much. So first and foremost, when I watched that video and I heard I 4 or 5 times and my government and it is my view, the questions I asked were, who did you consult? Did you talk to trans kids? Did you talk to families with trans kids? Did you actually consult with parents? So what I wouldn't do is put forward something like that without having consultation with the people you're talking about and the people whose lives you're impacting. I wouldn't do that. And so to Randy's point, both Randy and I spent last night and into this morning consoling kids, talking to advocates, and then saying, we will make sure and go back to our cabinet colleagues that everything is on the table, anything that we can do, but the consultation with community, and this will be happening across the country. I mean, it has been happening, but I'm going to be heading on the road and bringing forward, you know, the opinions and the life experiences of those this impacts. So what I wouldn't do is put out a statement without proper consultation and othering people before, you know, I want to say, blowing up people's lives. There are kids, as Minister Boissonnault said, who woke up this morning and went, am I even safe? What do I do? What can we do? So it's hearing those voices and going back to the table that we sit at and doing whatever we can. But first, it's listening, consulting, understanding what community wants, because this is grassroots. And as Randy mentioned, yes, allies too, because first it's the queer community, and then whose rights come after that, right? Who next?
Do you think, to be specific, like what options are you looking at? What options are there?
We need to see whether this is legislation, whether this will be regulations. We need to see it in writing from the Premier. They're not sitting right now.
They're not.
So this is a thought bubble that she drops on people on the beginning of February. But I want to say, and I've talked to colleagues, I've talked to Marci, talked to other colleagues, we're going to take a look at all of our options. I mean, the Premier is squarely within her jurisdiction, but this isn't about jurisdiction. This is about keeping kids safe and alive. Take a look at the stats in Alberta. 50% of homeless kids today are queer youth. That includes trans and gender non-binary youth. So why is that? The vast majority of parents love their kids and are prepared to have this conversation with them, like I did with my folks at 28 coming out. They were the last people I told because it was the hardest conversation to have. But there are kids on the street right now today in all of our cities, in all of our communities that are on those streets because their parents have kicked them out, because they can't handle coming out or having kids that are gender diverse. And so, is this an issue with the Canada Health Act? Is it a legal issue? We're going to take a look at what Danielle Smith puts on the table. And I think what we have to do is civil society and Albertans and our allies across the country have to tell the Premier and her MLAs that this is not on. that she does not have agency over the lives of youth in Alberta, and Albertans need to stand up and tell Danielle Smith, enough's enough, and this, whatever this is, this law or these regs, cannot stand.
Are you prepared to withhold federal health funding from Alberta over this issue?
It's still too early to say,
But
but
is that
these are conversations that we will have. But right now, it's about centering those kids, right, and keeping kids safe. And as Minister Boissonnault rightly said, this is an ally moment, and it's an ally action moment. We need people to be standing up. I have to say that it is hard for communities to have to advocate for themselves all the time. There's a lot of trauma associated with that. And with transgender kids in particular, and Randy alluded to it, when you look at mental health outcomes, when you look at who, takes their life, when you look at all those stats, transgender kids are in the top percentile. So the question is, why focus on these kids that are what, 0.5% of the population in Alberta? Why focus on these kids? Those are the questions. Why focus on these kids?
But is withholding funding an option on the table?
Too early, but we will be having consultations with our cabinet colleagues. This just happened.
This response right now when legislation similar to this was already passed in other provinces. Why is it Alberta taking this to spark some kind of response for you?
I'll take that. I've been very consistent with what the Higgs government has done in New Brunswick and what Mo's doing in Saskatchewan is not on either. And we have been very clear when those governments put in legislation and went down this path that we needed allies and champions. I think the reason you're seeing such a strong reaction now is because of how draconian these sweeping rules are. Like this is, you've got to have your parents opt in just to understand the basics of biology and sex ed. You've got to, now there's going to be a gender-neutral sports league that's going to be set up in Alberta. These are things that are beyond absurd, and the Premier soft-pedaled that this was coming and then drops a bomb on youth, and we need Canadians to rise up in all of their jurisdictions, but right now the fight is on in Alberta because, look, there are other jurisdictions that are watching. There are conservative governments in this country that are watching to see how far they can go, and now they're going to watch and see what Danielle Smith gets away. What's going to happen here in Ontario? What's going to happen in other conservative governments?
L'approche du Québec qui a nommé un comité d'experts, est-ce que vous trouvez que le Québec, l'approche est plus raisonnable?
Mais regarde, je suis toujours un fanatique des données et des conseils des experts, que ce soit toute une panoplie d'experts, c'est important. Mais Mme Smith a fait ça unilatéralement. Elle n'a pas fait des consultations, ni avec les parents, ni avec les enseignants, ni avec les jeunes qui sont affectés par ces proposés. Et donc, pour moi, si Mme Smith voulait avoir un panel d'experts, ça serait un pas dans la bonne direction. Mais de lancer cette bombe sur la jeunesse albertaine, inacceptable.
Are you willing to accept a province disallowing access to a health service like gender-affirming care? Like, we're trying to understand what's on the option here.
Well, it's not yet. This is as Randy said.
She said gender-affirming care is a no-go
But this
anymore.
is, we have to see what she drops on the table. They're not even sitting right now.
But she
So
said
this
what
is,
she's gonna do.
this
She's
is
stated her
literally,
policy out there.
but she needs to actually put it down, right? Like it actually needs to be a policy. And what I would also say is, this is dropped at a time when there is rising hate in this country, and we all know this. And so why are we coming out and talking about this? And we have been consistent, is that there is a rise in hate. You all know that. You see what's happening on a daily basis, specifically with this community. So it is important to speak up, and we will do that. But as we said, we are watching, and more than watching, we are actually talking to community. We will hear what community wants to do, and we are bringing everything back to the table.
They want to access community advocates.
Thank you so much.
What do you have to say to community advocates who say you haven't done enough, though?